Welcome back to another episode of Built from the Inside Out. I'm Brenda Carrasco, your host, or Brenda Nava.
There you
And
go.
I'm here with my amazing husband, Juan. Thank you for being here today.
Happy to be here.
And our guest today is Von Eden the Garden, former Marine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, so it's really great. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So today he will be talking to us about his experience with COVID while in the military and overseas. He'll be talking to us about his findings as a vlogger and diplomat over the theme of totalitarianism and compare and contrast it to Western society. And then finally, we'll also talk about his rough transition out of the military and how his experience with God and the gym has helped him with his PTSD and mental health. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So let's start off with you talking to us about your COVID experience in the military and overseas. How was that for you?
Nice. Let's see if I can get this all summed up in a short amount of time because that one's a heavy topic. And the reason why is because you remember how during COVID, a lot of the world was globally shut down.
Right.
And I think, I don't know, I didn't experience COVID in the United States. I experienced COVID while I was in Sri Lanka and Colombo. That's where I was stationed at the U.S. Embassy over there. And so I don't know what people are doing in America. I think people are going to Mexico, right? For vacation.
Oh, yeah, Cancun. Yeah, my whole feed
Cancun.
was nothing but Cancun. Yeah.
Yeah. See, we did not have that luxury. Everything was shut down in Sri Lanka. And when I mean shut down, I finally recently came to a wow moment that I experienced martial law. And that's how it was in Sri Lanka. And I showed up to Sri Lanka 2019, right after the Easter Sunday bombings that happened. And I showed up like a month after that. And it was already pretty strict. There was police and military everywhere, checkpoints all over every single block, people with guns, and you're always being stopped. Now, fast forward when COVID happened, it was like on steroids. And it was pretty crazy over there. The government was shut down. Everything was shut down for at least 6 months. And I mean, no one is allowed to be in the streets. If you're out in the streets, you better have a good reason because the police or the military will detain you.
And that was at any time or just at night?
That was anytime.
Okay.
They would have a curfew set, but it's pretty much the whole time. And they would open up the curfews for people to, because they realized people need to eat, because people
Right.
were starving to death, and people need to get their meds. And we did not have the country and the businesses did not have that luxury of having delivery. So like Uber delivery and curbside pickup, that was non-existent over there.
You sent me a picture of the long lines, and we'll share all the documents you sent me. But you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so speaking about basically what I was talking about, mentioning when you had that short period of time where you're able to get out of your house, people use that to stretch their legs. People use that to be able to socialize. I mean, some people abuse the system, our natural instincts to be able to socialize as human beings, and that tribal aspect to go see how your grandma is doing down the street or your neighbor. But the government only gave people 2 hours, 2 hours to be able to go and get your groceries. And if you want to share that photo, it'll be a good time to share right now because in this photo, I'll describe as like you'll see the grocery store, and 2 people were allowed to go inside, and each person had 1 minute. That was that strict to get their groceries and get out.
Yeah.
But yes, the government gave everybody 2 hours, and then they realized 2 hours wasn't even enough. Like the lines were so long, people were waiting in their cars very long for just to get anywhere. That they realized they're like, okay, we need to push this curfew to 6 hours. And then 6 hours, that still wasn't enough. And then you had the people who are abusing the system. But I think the last time I lost count of it, but there was over like 16,000 people who've been detained and arrested for violating curfew.
Oh, wow.
And then if you were caught in your vehicle violating curfew, they had their vehicles impounded and the government took control of it.
That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so how was your personal experience? Were you also in line, or because you were in the military, was it different for you?
Well, not just military, but as a we were I was a stand-in diplomat. I still had a diplomatic passport,
Okay.
but we had a little bit of a different kind of, I would say maybe like diplomatic privileges, but it wasn't that much extremely different. But
Mhm.
we were able to still get our groceries. The embassy there is not a secret or anything like that. Every single ally to the U.S., we had our own grocery store in the U.S. embassy. It's called
Okay.
the ARAC, and anybody that's allies with the U.S. was allowed to use it. So the Americans, obviously, they had the first diplomats, but the Marines definitely had first diplomats. First dibs on everything, because if you have Marines without alcohol, how are they going to function? So all the liquor stores are closed. By the way, they were not open. People were getting
Okay.
wine in the black market. But yeah, we had first dibs on everything because we're essential employees. We were like pretty much the only people working inside the embassy. So we had the system set up along with the Marine that was in charge of our food. We call them the mess Marine. And they had the system set up for them to get the groceries and stuff. So we didn't really have to wait in long lines,
Okay.
but we also struggled. We had to get limited supplies.
And then you got in trouble. Do you want to share that story with us?
You're going to share that document as well. So
Yeah.
that document, yeah, it's funny as you bring it up. So we call that the Nina Eden policy, because there's an example in there about um, the COVID procedures about social distancing, and what the U.S. Embassy, well, the Department of State's policy on it, since all this COVID stuff was brand new, they needed to make a guideline policy of what is considered social distancing, right?
Mhm.
So um, they had a green, yellow, and red categories. And man, let me try to bring up that document if I can remember.
Okay.
So, like, there was different things you're allowed to do. If and there was an example that was brought up with the Marines. Um, we were allowed to gather, but you had more than like, I'm just speculating a number. I forgot. There was an established number, but if you had more than two families worth of people, that's breaking the social distancing.
Okay.
So the Marines, since we all lived together, we were considered a family household. But if you had
Mhm.
like the Eden family wanted to go with the Perez family, you're okay to do that. But if you wanted to incorporate the chapas inside the family, nah, you're breaking social distancing. And the question is like, how do you figure that number out? Like, we all have like a lot of kids, and
Mhm.
so there was a lot of hypocrisy going on in this, and this was led to us getting in trouble because we were allowed to break the social distancing rules, but then it was also penalized on people, and it only seemed like the people who were like always causing friction was the one that was always getting penalized. But
Mhm.
the people in charge, the regional security officers group, we all had a get together family or like some kind of work related event. It was like a barbecue at the main man's house who was running the security, who's and supposed to enforce this policy. It was more than like 20 of us in this house celebrating while we're supposed to be social distancing. But no one was social distancing. And then everyone's
Mhm.
sitting there sharing stories about how they were going to the club or how they were going to a bar or how they were just got done traveling. And we're like, me and my other buddy, we were kind of perplexed a little bit. We're like, why are you guys doing that when you're supposed to be social distancing? Because we
Mhm.
like to go out too, but we're not allowed to. And so we figured out it was okay to like, if they're breaking the law or the policy, it's not a law, but they pretty much made it seem like it was a law. We're
Mhm.
allowed to do that as well. And there was an example that was brought up. There's this place called Park Street Muse in Colombo,
Mhm.
and there's a bunch of cafes. Now in the green zone, you're okay to go to a cafe, but in the red or in the orange zone, if it was a bar, you can't stay there and sit dining in because that's breaking social distancing. So a
Mhm.
couple of the Marines, senior Marines, were asking the commander, "Is it okay if we go to the cafe, order a beer, but don't sit, but we're walking everywhere. Is that breaking social distancing? The commander's like, oh, no, no, that's okay. You could do that. So me and my other
Science.
buddy, yeah, right? Science, right? Me and my buddy are just looking at each other like, okay, okay. Because we were the black sheep already, because we like to have a social life.
Mm.
So we were always out before COVID. Well, the thing changes. Park Street Muse, that place is one of the most popular places in Colombo, and it's kind of a narrow alley. It's so packed, you're shoulder to shoulder brushing each other all the time. So if you're allowed to be that close in proximity with each other, walking around with a beer, we should be able to go to a bar and be able to do the same thing too, which don't sit down. But that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, well, we tried doing that right after that. Regional security officers will like get together event when we're already breaking the rules, and the commander was there breaking the rules with us. And then we went to a hotel that has a bar outside, and there's nothing wrong with going to a bar, but as long as you don't sit down. Well, we picked like the most furthest distance, and we had like a table, but we put our beers down on it, but we never sat down, and we still got in trouble. So then this paper that you're going to bring up later in the production, that's called the Ida Nina policy, where they use us as an example of what not to do, even though I just stated all the context of the things that everyone was already breaking. And it's just like, it was hypocrisy. And it cost us our career. Like, we got penalized pretty hard.
What can you talk about that, or are you able to?
Well, there was a lot of people who were penalized with in this specific, because I was a Marine security guard, and there's this thing called RFC, which is removed for cause, which is basically for the enlisted side. That's what it's called. For officers, it's I forgot the word it's called. You just pretty much lose all trust. The command loses all trust in you, and it's not a good thing. It's a career ender when you get that. And usually in the civilian courts, you have the court justice system. Well, also in the military, we have the thing called a UCMJ. And UCMJ is basically our court system. And it's pretty strict. And when you get in trouble with it, you can lose rank, you can lose deduction of pay, you can have both. You can be put on like house arrest, basically, which is what happened to us for a different situation. But if you house arrest, it's like you go work and home. That's it. You can't go anywhere else. And also it can, which was happening throughout the career with people who we'll get into the subject later on, but people who are resisting on that, taking the COVID shot, we were experiencing a lot of repercussions from it. And it can slow you down on your progress for getting promotion, or going to a TDY post, or going to a new unit, or going to a new class. It puts a really bad stain on your reputation.
Wow. So now that they have come out and said, you know what, the vaccine wasn't actually effective, are you guys able to fight back, or like do something about how you guys were treated or punished?
Yes and no. So I'm not an expert at it. I'm only going based off of like how proactive I'm in keeping up with it. There are experts. I'll name. There's a military activist group on Instagram, and then there's also Terminal CWO. He's really good. He's actually one of the he's a warrant officer, and he's been very vocal about this whole COVID stuff. And there's rumors that the DOD right now is deleting people who took the vaccine off their medical records, which is questionable. So he's really like one of the forefront experts that's being very vocal about all this stuff. So he has all the information. I'll share the info if you want me to. I think I shared you a few of his videos. But yes, can we go back and do anything about it? Yes and no. I am in the process right now of getting my discharge upgraded, because yes, because of COVID and me not taking a shot, I did get out with a general general discharge under honorable conditions, which is still considered honorable, but I lose benefits like my education benefits. I can't use my GI Bill. Um, I did get a demotion as well when I got in the military, and because I went against the grain. And this is what I mean: when you go against the grain, you're walking on eggshells. There are
Mhm.
processes and steps, but the fact of how much the DoD is confirming to say yes, you were right, we're wrong, they're not going to do that. And the whole point of me coming up here and talking about this is to show the public, to make them aware that the United States government is corrupt. The
Yeah.
DoD, Department of Defense, is absolutely corrupt. And I used to drink the Kool-Aid. I was like, yeah, like America's great, which we are, but what makes I shouldn't fear for my repercussions, because what makes us Americans, we should be able to speak out about our government and
Mhm.
keep them in check, because we want the best out of our own government and our own civilians. And we want to set the precedence for examples for other countries, because there's
Right.
not a top 5 index of corrupt countries. They have like a color coordination index. Sri Lanka and Kazakhstan, the places I've been to, they're high up there in corruption. So it's like when I'm being surprised and living and being stationed in these countries and living on their economy, and I see how corrupt they are, and then I can compare it to what's going on with the US. So the DoD is going to be, nah, you taking a shot, good for you. You not taking a shot, bad. You're a bad person. They're not going to admit that.
Right. So let's since you touched on it, let's go ahead and get into comparing it to totalitarianism. So I know while you were over there, you did a vlog and you were learning about all those things. Share a little bit about us, like people who are listening who probably don't know anything about it.
Yes. So I want to thank one of my buddies. Joel Nina, he actually inspired me and pushed me to start opening up my own YouTube channel, which I'm not a fan of the company because we all know how they are. I'm actually looking into transitioning to Rumble. But I started a travel vlog, and
Mhm.
what makes my travel vlog unique is not only because I'm military or was military, but I still was traveling when everybody else couldn't travel. And I showed the I guess I showed what Sri Lanka was like after the effects of that terrorist attack in 2019. And then on top of that, I show what Sri Lanka was like during COVID. And then I show what Sri Lanka was like after COVID. And then I showed what the world was kind of like, as I still traveled and I still made some videos of what the world was doing post COVID. While America is over here playing, because like I said, I wasn't in the country, America is still playing COVID. Everybody else kind of didn't care. And then
Mhm.
to give testimony to that, the last place that, and I'm still currently making a video about this, but I was in Sweden, and we all know how Sweden was, right?
Well, share a little bit for those who don't know.
Yeah, so Sweden is the only country that actually did not have any COVID measurements or countermeasurements to spreading the reduction. They never closed schools, they never closed the society. They still did everything normal. No social distancing, no the mask enforcement, no mandates. Now it was still encouraged for people to get the shot, but in Sweden, they didn't follow that. I think maybe the most dumbest COVID countermeasurement that was there was probably like if you go to a club, you can't dance on the dance floor. You have to like stay in your chair and dance in your chair, which is, and you can't sit up at the bar like that. Like, come on.
It doesn't make sense, but it's better. Yeah, I mean, it's better than the other countries.
Yeah, but I've experienced COVID countermeasurements in different countries. Like Kazakhstan is crazy how they handled COVID. Sri Lanka was crazy how they handled COVID. And so that's what my YouTube channel, I share that. I bring that very interesting niche where people couldn't travel, but I still was. On top of that, I have this little, I wouldn't call myself, I'm just an amateur at it, but I like pre World War and also like Soviet Union era history. And what got me into it is I have a degree in art. I'm an artist.
Okay.
And that's what also kind of leads into my interest in my travel vlog, because I like to travel to see different art.
That's awesome. And I'll share the link on the once I post the video. That way people can go check it out.
Oh yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. My
Yeah.
last video that's on right now, it's my experience with betrayal and wrath. That one, like, it was a very emotional video that I created, and actually, I haven't released a video ever since then because I'm still recovering mentally. But like, I think I did a pretty good one on that one.
What is that one about?
That one was basically, this is when I went to the Baltic countries. So I was in, I believe, Lithuania. And I went there for a reason because tensions are pretty high with this whole Russian phobia and Russia doing a special operation in Ukraine, right? It's not a war, it's a special operation in their terms. And so I went over to the Baltics because the same thing they did to Ukraine, they can still do to the Baltic countries, which there's still a good portion of Russian nationals living in the Baltics. So I went over there to go see what's going on with how things are and how tense it is. And it's the place is based in a place called the Crosses. The Crosses is a very religious holy pilgrimage site. And so I had like a very spiritual movement, and I had a message, and I do pretty good with the whole Baltics about comparing the totalitarianism to the Western world and how the Western world is starting to adopt a lot of these like totalitarianistic characteristics and like dictatorship personalities, and it's very toxic.
How would you say it compares? Because right now they're trying to bring back the COVID restrictions. I don't know if you heard. I haven't been watching the news, but that's what I've seen on social media.
Yes, actually, Alex Jones. Everyone sees him as the conspiracy guy, right? I mean, he's
Yeah.
legit conspiracy guy, but he was the first one to release. He had the whistleblower go on his channel on the Infowars, and the whistleblower said they're going to start doing COVID mandates and all that stuff all over again in mid-September. So we're in mid-September and we're starting to see it happening, and it's true. It was fulfilled, and there's all kind like. Let me use a good example of the corruption.
Mhm.
Right now, let's just say majority of people in America. I'm only speaking on my own opinions, so no one on anyone's behalf, no organization's behalf or anything. Just my opinions. I think Americans are fed up with politicians in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a mistrust.
For sure.
And that's not good because there's a mistrust with also the medical field. We don't trust anything now when it comes to medical. And I give this comparison because I compare it to me as a former Marine. If I was given a task to protect a civilian population, but let's just say I'm just like a turd bag, all right, and I'm walking around and I accidentally shoot a round just because I'm a turd bag, and the round injures somebody, injures a kid. You think the public is going to trust those Marines protecting them anymore?
No.
No, you wouldn't want to trust anybody who doesn't know how to handle like the simple weapon safety rules, who's supposed to be there to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
So I compare it to the medical field right now, like Fauci and the WHO director Walensky or whatever, and all those other people who are running the show, and even our own primary care doctors. Like, COVID has the shots have massive amounts of dangerous side effects.
Yeah.
And you're telling me to trust in the science.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not too long ago, we are all laughing about like the Sweden club scene countermeasurements, how like, okay, trust the science. Or like the earlier thing I was talking about Sri Lanka, how we're all like gathered together and partying when we're supposed to be social distancing, but it's like, trust the science, right?
Mm-hmm.
How they're the ones that accidentally pulled the trigger and injured somebody when they did it. It's called negligent discharge.
Mm-hmm.
When they shot around when they weren't supposed to. We can't trust them anymore. That's damaging to their credibility.
Right.
So, on top of that, to answer your question, is medical tyranny. You have in California, you give the authorization for a Starbucks hostess to ask you for your vaccine card in order for you to get service.
Wow.
That that is what the heck?
Yeah.
Like that is a
Like,
good definition of totalitarianistic.
right. I understand, like, they're trying to the profit side of things. So obviously this is very profitable for them. But what do you think is the end goal? Do you think it goes beyond that? Do you think there's like this agenda that goes beyond them making money?
Yes. If this is what I have to say about that. That's a good question. I hope I don't get labeled as a conspiracy theorist now. Dang.
Go for it. With everybody's finding out that all the conspiracy theories are coming true, so go for it.
Right? We're like 105 and 0 right now. Like everything. The thing is, if you start believing that the government is there to always be on your side and you can trust them, you're wrong. And you need to start people. I'm speaking out to people who are still believing in the Kool-Aid. All right, still drinking that Kool-Aid. America was always meant to be keeping our government in check. We were allowed to be vocal against our government. So we have the First Amendment. So we have the Second Amendment. That's why we have a lot of amendments to protect us. We're allowed to do that. We became a country because we fought against tyranny, England, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to be comfortable with that. Now, when our government gets too big, which is why a constitution was made to prevent the government from getting too big, that's when it becomes an issue. And that's what the government has been doing. Their track record is pretty clear. And you ever heard that quote about you give somebody inches and they take a mile?
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same thing. You think we took those policies back when 9/11 happened? The government never retracted on that. Each president, they renew that exhibition of power, and it still continues. So it goes back to like what the government is doing. New World Order, that's a conspiracy theory, right?
Mm.
But
is it though?
it's not called a New World Order. It's called the Liberal World Order. And that is an actual key term. Biden says it. There's a lot of key officials, politicians in America, and New Zealand, and Australia. And I have this in one of my videos. If you look it up on my YouTube channel, I do talk about this. And I can't remember which video it was, but in one of my videos, I talk about this. I think the one I sent you, remember, on the stories? Yeah. It was that one. We do have a liberal world order. That's what they want. In England, they were testing out these 15-minute cities. These smart cities, they're supposed to keep everybody in close proximity to something that's within 15 minutes, so you don't have to go out to, I'm still living in Lubbock, so I don't have to go out 4 to 5 minutes to Plainview to go to the store there. Like, they want us to be in these little small districts. The government, I think, has been hijacked. That's my personal opinion. But there is a thing called the liberal world order. They want to have an established world order. Countering that, you have this whole BRICS thing that Russia and China are doing, trying to topple the US dollar. That's like, it sounds familiar. Axis and allies. Remember during World War II? Mm. They're creating their teams. And there's this end game that we don't see. And we had to just speculate from here because that's just how it is. Like we're not on a know-it-all to know what's going on, but we could definitely say that like our gut feeling is telling us like it's kind of hard to trust things right now, especially the government.
Right. So what's the goal with the new order?
Control. Obviously, I think it's control. Yeah, that's like a question a lot of people are wondering. Is like, what is this goal? Mm-hmm. Like, what are they going to gain out of it? I think it's to continue making the rich richer, the poor or the middle class even more poor. We have a good example of what's going on right now of a two-tiered justice system. Have you heard of that before?
No.
This episode was brought to you by BCN Supplements, our all-natural supplement company. First off, we have our hydrolyzed collagen. This is a 4-in-1. It comes with vitamin C for better absorption, hyaluronic acid, and biotin. So this is good for your skin, your hair, your nails, and your joints. And this is for both men and women. Next up, we have our immunity, which is a 7-in-1 vitamin. It has vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, echinacea, elderberry, black pepper, and garlic bulb. So this will give your immune system that extra boost. And lastly, we have our natural pre-workout. It does have 325 milligrams of natural caffeine from green tea. It is sweetened with stevia, and its purpose is energy, focus, and endurance. And for our listeners, we do have a discount code. If you visit our website, www.bcnsupps.com, you can use code BUILT, BUILT, for 10% off. Thank you so much for listening.
So look at the case that's going on with Joe Biden. Like I think it was 5 months ago when he was leaving classified material inside his garage door, inside his Corvette. You remember that?
Yeah, no, I haven't. Hear that one. I haven't been keeping up with that.
Yeah. So Joe Biden, our president, was leaving classified material in unsecured locations.
Oh, so, I think I saw a meme about that, actually.
Yeah, there's lots of memes. Yeah. Of course, the internet.
Yeah.
The internet took advantage of that. So I'm using it as an example because in America, it's like if you were to do something bad, or if I were to do something bad, which I use my time in the military, I've done some things that are like considered bad in their eyes. I got crucified. My punishments were bad. Now, when I was a Marine security guard, if for those who don't know, a Marine security guard, they do, each embassy or consulate, they're protected by detachment Marines. A certain amount of Marines are there. We're not allowed to disclose that number, but they're usually range between like 7 to 50 Marines at an embassy. And they're there to protect them because the United States is a global player in the world. People don't like us. We got to protect their embassies and consulates. And we also got to protect, our other mission is protect classified material, counter espionage, make sure like no spies come in and lease classified material. Like we're there to make sure we're access control. So we control the interior of the whole embassy. And also protect the mission and the diplomats, like the ambassadors. The ambassadors that go over and represent the United States' policies. So we're there to protect them. So going back to the classification material, our job is to go around the building after hours and make sure people put their stuff up, their classified materials. So I'll give people a quick lesson about what's classified materials. So you have restricted, you have confidential, you have secret, and then you have top secret, and then you have a really big one called a top secret SSEI, which is like, it's bad if people find out. So from my understanding is that Joe Biden was leaving top secret and top SSEI classifications materials in his garage. Now, as a diplomat, and me as a Marine is walking around making sure everyone puts their stuff away, there's certain levels that you have to put classification of materials away and containers and different kinds of things, right? There's a process. So if someone doesn't do that and they break that process, it can be pretty damaging or a career ender. And I've had to write up some people about leaving some stuff out. And that's not a good thing. You're sweating bullets like, oh man, I can't believe I did this. But Biden's over here just like, yeah, I just left it in my Corvette. Nothing's going to happen to me. That's how we see it. Yeah. How is he, the man in charge, setting the standards for diplomats overseas? It's a two-tier justice system. How are we expected to uphold these standards like up here when he's over here, but he still wants us to enforce it up here?
There's so many things Biden has done that you're like, how is he still a president? Like, yes. Why haven't they done something? And that tells you how corrupt the U.S. government is.
Yes, and compare it to totalitarianistic things like I've seen. Let's say the FBI. I always wanted to be an FBI agent. I wanted to work for the government as a special agent. FBI was one of the agencies. Why are they showing up and making a list of parents going to protests to these PTSA meetings about kids
Mm,
reading these weird books in libraries and in this critical race stuff.
mm.
This is all new to me when I came back because I'm having a reverse culture shock coming back here. So that's why I'm like questioning about it because I don't know what that. There's a lot of things I'm learning that's going on here.
It's crazy.
It sure is. So it's like, why is the FBI targeting these parents? Are parents threats? Are they domestic terrorists? So let's combine everything that was happening in COVID and let's combine what the FBI was doing and let's switch the conversation to the Soviet Union from what I've learned. And I've been to quite a bit of like former Soviet countries and satellites. And I lived in Kazakhstan, and that's a great country, and it used to be a former Soviet country. But this is what the KGB did. They used their neighbors to spy on each other, and if their neighbor was doing something questionable,
Mm.
or they listened to Western rock music, like they're probably doing something they're not supposed to be doing. So, COVID. If you were walking outside without the mask and your neighbor saw that or someone else saw that, people were getting the police on them.
Mm.
Australia was a great example of that. New Zealand was a great example of that. I don't know really too much. I don't know what too much was going on in America because, again, I was on the other side of the hemisphere. But they had camps, health camps for people. And that's true. That's not conspiracy of people who had COVID. And they threw them in these camps because their neighbors snitched them out. That is a very Soviet style technique.
Yeah. Yeah, history repeats itself. As much as people want to say, "Oh no, if you study history, you won't repeat it." No, you're gonna repeat it. It happens.
That's true. It will repeat.
Yeah. So for the people who don't know much about that era, can you give us a brief summary?
Yes. Let's see. The Soviet Union. Let's talk about espionage real quick, okay?
All
The
right.
Soviet Union has been doing espionage for a very long time. Now, there's all kinds of warfares being fought that we don't see. If you're a believer, there's the spiritual warfare that we know. There's economic warfare, like we currently see what's going on with inflation, recession, and all that stuff. You have geopolitical warfare that's going on throughout these different regions. There's all kinds of warfares going on, but there's also intelligence warfares that are also being fought that we don't see. So the Soviets, or let's just say the Russians, were probably like one of the experts in spycraft. They've been doing it for a very long time. And so bringing that up is because the Soviet Union, after they had the Bolshevik Revolution, which was called the White Russians, trying to oust out the Russian Empire back then it was called, the Soviets took over and they won, which is now we see it as the Red Army, right? The Reds.
Mm.
They became a very paranoid government. The Soviet Union was one of the most paranoid governments out there. And if you look at your history in World War II, when Germany basically almost destroyed the capital of Russia, or the Soviets, America was supposed to be there to back them up. What did America do? We're like, nah, we never backed them up. So the Russians and the Americans have always been like this with each other. And then Roosevelt's wife brought Leonida, I think I pronounced her name right. She was one of the most deadliest female snipers in the Russian Red Army over to the United States as a propaganda like relation building thing. We started seeing what the Soviet Union was really like. The Soviet Union is, like I said, a very paranoid government where they adopted like the communist socialist agenda where like everything is the government's and everybody doesn't really need a lot. So like the average salary, if you worked a really great job, maybe as a doctor, you were probably getting paid like $300 when you should be getting paid a lot. They don't want you to have that luxury. And so the government was always taking a lot. And when during Stalin was a dictator, there was a lot of people who died. And I want to give a quick comparison is during the Baltics, what I learned is a lot throughout those Baltic countries, the people of these countries couldn't really fend for themselves. They were occupied by Nazi Germany, and then they were forced to work for them, or they would probably end up in there was those labor camps and no, concentration camps. And then when the Soviets came and liberated them, they were forced to work for the Soviets. But if you worked for the Nazis, you were a conspirator, and they sent you to the gulags. So there's no win-win. Mm. And this is what happens when you have totalitarianistic governments that take over. There's no win-win. You're screwed. You're at the mercy of the government, and that's a whole eggshell. Skipping on like terms, stuff like that, because I did a really good job of talking about the difference between what totalitarianistic government is. And if I said it right now on your podcast, we would have been finishing the time.
Yeah, no, we'll share your channel so people can go watch it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. But I do want to like lead it to like the spiritual faith thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, as a believer, because the Bible does talk about, certain things. I personally haven't really studied it. I have a book on Revelations that I haven't sat down to read, but I know a lot of people mention the Bible when it comes to that. And is there anything we as a society can do, or is it just what's meant to happen?
Well, first, I've always been a Christian, but I've strayed different ways. Like I've definitely gone to like a stopping, like really devout Christian. I started when I was in Sri Lanka. I was already interested in Buddhism, but then I became more interested in Buddhism because Buddhism is a pretty pinnacle religion over there in Sri Lanka. Then like I strayed off and became a Baha'i, which is Baha'is believe in like basically every religion, every prophet was meant to be sent here by God. But I still consider myself a Christian because I believed in Jesus Christ died for my sins. But I was also a Baha'i believer. But I've recently converted again, devoted myself back to Christianity because I'm like going through my phases of exploring. And then COVID, what really made me come back to my faith was because of pandemic. What the pandemic created was everything that was now evil is good, and everything that was now good is now evil. Mm-hmm. It talks about that in Revelations in the Bible of when end the times are coming close. Mm-hmm. It's crazy now what's going on in society, and it's mostly Western societies are going through this.
Yeah.
I think you had the guys from Charlie Mike. Is that who you were talking? The guys on your podcast, both of y'all?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like what was it Mike, Raul, and Will?
Yeah, Raul and Will.
Yeah, I like what they're talking about when they're finding a name for their company. It's complete the mission, and it's like it's completely, absolutely true. Right. The Marine Corps changed me. It took a lot from me, and I joined the infantry. I thought war was a rite of passage, basically, in my life. How can you try to find humility in life when like you haven't experienced war? That's just my philosophy. Everyone is different. So I joined the infantry, and I was like, I joined the infantry because I wanted to experience something rough like that. So you have to prepare yourself because I've seen some crazy things throughout my time, and I did 6 years, and I've got to see quite a bit of the world. And so how do you like explain some of these things about humanity when you look at like the most absolute worst things that humanity can show you? Mm-hmm. And it really it changed me a lot as a person when I was joining the military, and I never noticed that because before I joined, I was a very sweet, innocent person. I am. I think I am, but I don't want to toot my own horn here. But it really did take a lot away from me. And I thought I was going to have a good time transitioning from the military back to civilian life because I joined at 24 years old. I was kind of old. I already had a college degree, and I was like, all right, let's do this. So connecting this to my spiritual life, COVID definitely rang the bell for me. And then I had a hard time transitioning. So on top of the reverse culture shock of being away from the country for 3.5 years, which by the way, I couldn't come back to America because I wasn't vaccinated. So the DOD, my command, wouldn't let me come back to America because America had high COVID transmissions. So if I came back to the US and then back to my unit overseas, I was going to spread it to everybody because I wasn't vaccinated.
Mm.
So that's one of the things I was dealing with. It was hard. I fought against the government about my faith, my spiritual faith. The government wanted to be better than God. They wanted to get in between my faith and be like, no, you listen to us. You don't listen to your faith. I exercised my First Amendment of not taking the COVID shot, a religious accommodation. I faced so much scrutiny throughout that it really messed me up mentally. How am I supposed to be following orders from this general, or like let's just say the commander in chief, which is Biden, when they're afraid of this virus that's, I mean, I'm not going to say it didn't kill people, but it was over exaggerated to the point of like how deadly was it versus this vaccine. What happens, you know what's more deadlier than a virus? Your enemy shooting at you or blowing you up. You'll die instantly. But they put so much stress onto me for no reason, for not taking a shot and exercising my First Right Amendment. When I got out, I mean, I really felt wrath and betrayal because what do I do with all this loyalty and this patriotism that I have for our country? One of my trigger things that gets me pretty like misty-eyed is seeing kids laughing and smiling because I look at them, they're in their purest form of innocence. They don't realize there are people out there wanting to kill them. It's true. It's absolutely true. Or kidnap them if you've seen the movie Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
There's evil out there. So I was struggling with all this and getting out of the military, and I didn't feel understood. I also was having a hard time understanding what happened to the America when I left in 2019 and 4th of July. That's when I left to Sri Lanka. I didn't get to experience the fireworks. What happened to that America when I came back in November of 2021? It's changed. People changed. The conversation, like you couldn't have a non-political conversation and like already hate each other or be on each other's same sides. Like what happened to the compassion in between those conversations? What happened to it's okay to agree to disagree? Like it just absolutely flip-flopped my mindset of like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I actually I guess technically I've almost been back in America for a year because when I first came back, I left to Mexico. Like within those 4 months of me being out of the military. And then I went to Panama. And then I went to Dominican Republic. And then I finally came back to the US for another couple of months. And then I went back to Sweden. Like I didn't really stay in the US that long when I got out of the military because I felt safer traveling and experiencing like harsher environments of different countries than the safety of my own home because I couldn't feel comfortable. So I say all this not to be like feel bad for me or anything. For all your audience, this whole show is me to let you know the struggles that I'm not dealing with only, but there's a lot of people like me who are dealing with it. Like that's what I want to say on that because people don't know what's going on in the military. The DOD, I'll tell you what the DOD is saying about their active duty military personnel. That suicide rate declined. That's a BS lie. They're lying about that. So tying this into my faith again, like I was struggling a lot. I could not sleep unless I was piss drunk. It was bad. I was so hyper vigilant. and alone, like I struggled, and I'd never been like that before. And man, like I didn't even think I was going to survive that. But it is true. It's like complete the mission. And I tell people to this day, my faith is what saved me. Instead of
Mhm.
regressing, I progressed. And I, one of the things is I started doing, I started reading the Bible more. I don't know, for some reason, I guess God told me to read from Old Testament to New Testament. So I just finished Deuteronomy, and I feel pretty cool. Like it's a really cool experience to like actually like reading the Bible and looking and learning the verses.
Mhm.
It's a great learning experience too. But I started praying more. I started I stopped trying to fix my problems and I just gave it to God. I never done that before, and I started
Mhm.
making my life so much easier. And my travel experience in the Baltic countries and my last video, so it's really hard for me to try to upload another video right now because that was a very spiritual journey, and I want to share this about my journey there. When I was in Estonia, um, I walked, I walked 2 hours in the middle of the forest in winter on the side of this road to go to, I think it was one of the longest or widest waterfalls in Estonia, and it's on the edge where the Baltic Sea is.
Mhm.
And I didn't put this in the video, so this is like like what do you call it? That background information you only know if you watched your podcast show. Uh, something told me, not something, I shouldn't say that. God told me, get off the road, walk onto this farmer's field, and go to the edge. Go all the way to the edge. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Well, I'll do it. And I walked until I almost got to the edge. And I was being careful, and I followed a track of the farmer's field where it's nothing but weeds. And I looked up, like up, and at the edge of the cliff was a cross. I didn't plan that. And
Mhm.
I was like, is that even a cross, or is it like a boundary lane saying don't pass this or you'll fall off the edge of the cliff? So like, but it was a cross. And I took it as a sign. And I prayed. And then throughout this journey, like I've been having a lot of like, one of my prayers I asked God to do was show me miracles.
Mhm.
And so throughout this trip, like I had a lot of miracles happen this whole year since I prayed for that. And I started following the signs, and it led me to the crosses in Lithuania, which I didn't know was a famous place. And what I learned at the crosses, and I guess this is a pretty good tie, like to tie everything we talked about. That
Mhm.
video, it is a pretty good conversation. Tie everything in there. The totalitarianistic government, spiritual faith, um, following what you believe. Because I didn't take the shot because I believe in my faith, in God.
Mhm.
And we talk about that, and when it comes to judgment, like Satan's gonna test you and see if you're gonna deny God. And I felt like that was the first test for me right there when the government wanted me to take the shot, or like, do you want to believe your faith or you take the shot? Like that was one of those first tests that I saw.
Mhm.
So when I was at the crosses, I didn't know the history about it. I didn't know how famous the site was and how holy it was. And so when I got there, I this place is just so it's just powerful location. There's crosses everywhere, all kinds of crosses, new crosses, modern crosses, crosses that were burnt, and that's one of them that got my attention. Was there was this burnt cross that was leaning, like about to fall over, and it's burnt in the most pinnacle important spot of its structure, but it never fell. And then I looked at the history of the reason why the crosses was there during the Soviet Union era. The Soviets don't like anything religion. They destroy that stuff, especially when Stalin was in power. And so the people, the locals, kept bringing crosses to this site, and the Soviets kept bulldozing it and destroying it. And one cross turned into 5 crosses, and those 5 crosses turned into 20,000. And then the Soviets destroyed it again. And then at this, to this, the day that I visited, there's over like 300,000 crosses there. They stopped counting. And it's kind of, people kept on believing in their faith. And no matter how strong the Soviet Union would use them as a symbol, kept destroying their faith, it still multiplied. And so like that was beautiful to me. And God brought me to that location.
That's awesome. Would you say that was like your come to Jesus moment? Or was it before that or after?
I've had a lot of come to Jesus moments. I think God is kind of like, Lorenzo,
I think you
wake up.
Maybe taking that more of a confirmation that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're following the right path that he has set out for you. And I mean, it's huge to how you're saying once you start leaving everything to him, the way your life will change, and just totally believing in it. And just, I forget the scripture right now, but it's like, in all things, do not be anxious, but leave everything unto God. And once you follow that, like really believe in it and lean into being under the pillars of him, your life changes. And I mean, I think that's a big confirmation for you right there.
You're absolutely right. God gives us confirmations when we sit there and ask ourselves, God, give me a sign. Why don't you ever talk to me? That's the confirmation he was talking to us.
Yeah. And it's not the signs we expect. It's just like you weren't expecting to be there. You didn't know the history. You'll see something and then you have that aha moment once you like actually understand it. And you're like, man, he works in mysterious ways.
He sure does. Yeah. Amen.
I love that. What would you say to someone who is struggling with what you were struggling with? Someone who is out of the military and having a hard time, or even a civilian who's like us. We're in the middle of all this craziness.
Yeah. And mental health is really important. It's skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm taking therapy, but I'm not a fan of it. But does it help? Yes. But, find what you have faith in. So like for me, it was my spiritual faith. That's what's 99% of everything I'm dealing with. I thank God because I wouldn't do it without him. So I have my faith. That's what saved me. Find what that is for you. For the military folks, what we went through in the military is not normal for what civilians go through. So seek help. Get in groups. Don't be alone. When you're alone, that's when the devil attacks. And that's when you're at the weakest. I've been doing a lot of men's group stuff, so I'll speak for them, towards the men, godly men. Get in Christian groups. As Christians, have more Christian friends. Keep each other accountable. Because right now, like we are living almost every other month, there's something like end of the world, like crazy history was just made kind of situation. Like we're living in some crazy times.
Yeah,
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think personally, lately I've been trying to get closer to God as well. And what Juan said, just kind of leaning on him and letting go and understanding that you don't have control. Like he's the only one who has absolute control.
Yeah,
that's very big. Yeah, and like you said, there's power in numbers. So where there's 2 or 3, that's powerful.
This world is full of evil. You look on social media, there's evil just on the Explorer algorithm. That's why we need to be keeping each other accountable. Even probably going to church, or maybe a church is not your thing. Go to like these Christian groups. I went to men groups to learn how to become a more Christian man. Yeah. And it saved me a lot too, because the accountability of like, you shouldn't be doing that, or like, I'm aspiring to be just like that person. That's the accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like it does help because it gives you hope. Yeah. So when you live a life not believing in God or not believing in something higher than yourself, where is the hope? So you have no hope. So then why are you living? Why are you here if there's no hope, you know?
Yeah, well, those people find something, but I mean, that's pretty tough. Like, what is it? 'Cause for us, it's God.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I mean, just piggybacking on that, I feel like it's really good to, I mean, it goes back to what we get told as kids, like, show me who your friends are, I'll show you who you are. The people you surround yourself with, but I mean, if you said you grew up Christian as well as I did, your mom was like, that's not, you shouldn't be listening to that. I mean, it's so powerful. Like, our words are so powerful. It creates our thoughts, what we listen to. We repeat it in our head when you're singing a song. You're repeating it over and over. That's what you're thinking about. If you surround yourself with progressive things of, becoming closer to God, finding your purpose, your pursuit, just find people. If it's a podcast, people around you, something to help build you. It should be challenging because to build, you need those challenges. But I mean, from everything, from listening to you, it sounds like you're doing a great thing, man. Your YouTube channel, bringing awareness to that, pushing forward, advocating men's health. It's a big thing, especially letting go as a man. It's a big thing because we're brought up as to be the pillar of the household, but you're supposed to carry the weight of everything on your shoulders. You can't do that without having your firm foundation in God. So once you start doing that, man, your life changes so much, and I'm happy to see that you're striving there and that you have that purpose driven. That you see it, I can hear the passion in it. So I mean, it's awesome to see.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like you found your purpose, and God's gonna help you through it all, because I know it's not easy. It's not gonna be easy, but He'll be there by your side. We're very proud of you, and thank you for your services.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to share before we go?
People just need to wake up. It's time. It's over to be sleeping now, and you don't want to be caught with your pants down, because this is some crazy times we're living in. And stay positive, because we live in a world full of negative. And keep an eye on what's going on with the military, because the military are supposed to be like there to protect the citizens, and it's getting to the point where they're pushing out a lot of patriots. So everybody, like, when you say thank you for your service, like, actually mean it. Know what's going on in the military, because they are going to be the difference between how the totalitarianistic governments are going to start implementing enforcing these unlawful mandates. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for taking the time. And like I said, we really appreciate what you're doing, and we'll share your YouTube, and we'll try to help as much as we can.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me on here.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for tuning in to Built from the Inside Out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could benefit from it. Remember to subscribe to our podcast to stay connected. And here's a special treat for our loyal listeners. Use code BUILT at www.bcnsubs.com for a 10% discount on your next order of BCN supplements. Thank you for being part of our supportive community. We're glad you're here, and we hope you'll join us again in the next episode of Built from the Inside Out.